Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome to End of Dragons Daily 60, the big 6-0 today. Look how far we've come. Today we've got a bunch of miscellaneous comments on a variety of topics that have come up over the recent days. I spent a bunch of my time today working on a new project. Hopefully you guys will be seeing it is Guild Wars oriented on the channel in the coming days. And so the background footage I think will just be some of my daily strikes, which I'm still doing and stacking up the ingots. I've not even participated in any crafting for the new weapon sets yet. I'm just sort of building them up and hoping eventually it's fun when I decide to do it, and you know I've got a big excess, but I guess time will tell on that. Even with the lower rates, I think it's still pretty hard to get all those things. Right, let's jump in. First we've got Tanner Krauker, who says, just Kalka, hearing about the stone spores you mentioned yesterday makes me think there could be a mastery in the Echo Forest to reverse the petrification. Maybe harmful stone mushrooms become bouncing mushrooms instead. Purifying certain stone walls could make them vulnerable to roller beetle attacks. That's a really wild idea, because what you've done there is a cross combo mastery. It would be great to see them cross more masteries with each other, and there's already a precedent for purifying magic via Chark and the Leyline Scavengers in the Siren's Landing. If it's different creature capable of digesting magic, maybe it'll be a mount, since most of the mounts they make are new creatures original to Guild Wars 2 anyway, but then that shows we really have no idea what they'll do for mounts, if anything. Yeah, I think you've come up with some really cool ideas. Like I've said before, I do still think there's space for like a mount in Cantha. I was looking back at some of the Season 4 updates yesterday, and it was kind of interesting seeing how they kind of just dropped the roller beetle in with Corner. And I don't say that because of this whole expectation of the roller beetles in Cantha or whatever. They were alone and native, as we've mentioned recently on this series. But it's just like how they felt it would be a nice part of the update, so they did it. And a similar thing with the Sky Scale too, even though that was kind of an overarching whole season thing, and you know dragons are a big theme of the game, so there's all these extra reasons to do it. So I kind of feel like End of Dragons might do it as well. Everyone kind of thinks, oh, they're gonna have to do a big feature, like on par with all the infrastructure they added in Heart of Thorns, not just for masteries and elite specializations, but guild halls too. Or they've got to do something massive and as good as mounts. I don't think we're gonna see one big feature. I think we'll see lots of smaller things, if it's not a new race, and I think the new race is really the only thing on that kind of scale, to be honest. And so, yeah, maybe one mount in there, maybe two, works. And what kind of mount could work cleansing and decorrupting areas? Well, I think a Kirin. I think a Kirin works because it's kind of got like that immediate like horse-like vibe. So I think that they'd be able to sell a lot of skins, and a lot of like semi-casual people would like the idea of just being able to ride something with 4 hooves, you know, and of that kind of structure. And maybe as we travel on it, we can activate an ability or something, and yeah, it temporarily cleanses the Jade Sea in the Echo Forest. And that temporary cleansing is kind of a nice mechanism which would, first of all, allow them to do a really cool animation. I imagine like a Kirin galloping along, and behind it like these rainbows coming out of its arse or whatever, and you know it's painting the environment behind it, which was all dead and grey and gone, and suddenly it's looking lovely and lush and green as you move. Now let's remember, even in Guild Wars 1 there were a lot of quite green areas. In the background footage just 2 days ago, I was showing you Cantha. 3 days ago I was showing you Cantha, and you know there were mosses and stuff around, so they could do that. But this idea that a bouncing mushroom now grows, maybe it's not even like that there was a stone mushroom there, but maybe we actually see one spring up. They can visually do a lot of really fun things here, and you know maybe this activates vines that we can swing on, or you know now we can climb on stuff maybe that we couldn't before. Not quite sure how that would work. But then think about like all the massive structures that the Kurziks built. What if for some reason we can't get into some of them, and what we need to do is run over and like cleanse the area, and now this giant stone door has become wood and we can open it and move in? That kind of doesn't really fit with the lore, I think, because the Kurziks built those structures, I believe, after the petrification. Once it was stone, they could chisel into the trees like masons, and then it kind of works. But, you know, maybe you can do some kind of an interesting take here, especially if the idea is that, you know, as I said ages ago, it would be interesting to see the Kurziks or the Luxons are just all dead and gone. You know, that adds a new dimension to the world building. And because of that, these places are abandoned, you can't get into them, and now you need this like purification mount to be able to explore their rooms or something. I like this idea. And you know, the Kirin were like cleansing miasma and stuff in Zendaijin as well before, so they work. You could do some kind of Chak-oriented thing. The Chak are an interesting part of this world now, especially in light of the whole magic story. And if we think about the End of Dragons and magic being distributed everywhere cleanly again, I think that kind of rises more Chak stories immediately, doesn't it? But even beyond that, look at Aurene. Aurene, in a way, is like this healing dragon, as they're saying, and managed to, so to speak, cleanse the brand and change the way it looks and stuff. So maybe we're, once again, communing with her, using her magic. But basically, I think this is a brilliant idea, as long as, like, the cleansing is temporary. Because the idea of just unlocking a mastery and then sweeping through everything and now it's all done and you never interact with it again, I think it's kind of lame. I don't want this to feel like map completion. I want it to feel like a persistent part of the world. And the cross-mastery combos, I mean, there are some, you know, think about your gliding, and someone's going to snipe you out of the sky while you're gliding, so you stealth, and then after your stealth, you immediately, you know, sky scale, you bond a vigor off of the sky scale into an updraft. There's a lot of combos happening with something like that. Maybe you initiated the whole thing with a bouncing mushroom, and, you know, maybe this works. Maybe we purify stuff in the air to create updrafts on the fly. Oh, that would be fun. But again, how much the devs lean into old masteries is always a tricky subject when it comes to new X-Packs and their expectations of what the players have gone through. It's interesting because in Final Fantasy XIV that I've been playing recently, there is that absolute necessity to go through everything to experience what's now coming out, as far as I can see. And so those devs know that you have everything done. ArenaNet doesn't quite have that privilege. Now, and I think Elder Scrolls Online, you don't have that privilege either, but I've not played that one yet. Next, we've got BDG, who says, in the Iceboot Saga, they introduced Char snipers that can dismount you even when flying, so they have something that can dismount sky scales. Is this true? They can dismount you on a griffin and they can dismount you on a sky scale? Either I've become very forgetful and negligent in my, you know, appreciation and consumption of these patches, or I've never been dismounted off of a mount. Can they really completely do this? My only experience of being dismounted off of a griffin or a sky scale, as far as I can remember, is when I'm traveling really fast and I clip into the boundaries of a no-mount zone, and then it throws you off. And, you know, that itself is an example that, you know, they can, technologically speaking, do it. They have scripts that do that kind of stuff, so, you know, just attach it to a skill. But yeah, this is a good one as well. I mentioned the black arrows, they could do this. I also like the idea of giant nets in the sky, or airships, maybe, that come and flank you or something. I don't know. The airship thing's a bit weird, but with the Aether Blade inclusion in the expansion, you never know how much stuff there will be skyward bound here. Next, we have Matt D, who says, I was thinking about a new traversal system for the End of Dragons, and it hit me that a climbing/Assassin's Creed style building parkour system could be a good fit for this X-Pack. While climbing isn't as flashy sounding as mounts, or even gliding, having a slower system for vertical traversal could allow the Kaineng cityscape to be a very rich exploration experience. I'm imagining tight canyons of buildings that are too cramped for mounts, but still packed with explorable areas that require you to not only be able to do jumping puzzle style parkour, but actually climbing up sides of buildings to reach hidden alcoves. It was kind of funny, in the previous comment a second ago, I mentioned climbing, and yeah, I think this works if it's like certain areas of the terrain are painted with vines or ladders. I've always wanted to climb ladders, you know, or, you know, specific craggy stuff. We see in all these other action RPGs for the past decade, you know, they usually have some kind of visual cue on stuff you can climb and your character will latch onto, like maybe a bit of white shading. Those who saw me playing through the Tomb Raider games will be more than familiar with this kind of stuff. Fans of Uncharted and whatever, you know, we don't have to go into all of it. I think that this could work, and this is exactly what I was saying a second ago, that if they do add more masteries, let's just focus on masteries for a second. If whatever their new masteries are, I think you're going to see a selection of divergent things that, as a whole, probably won't rival the incredible experience and transformative moment that the inclusion of mounts was. But they are nonetheless interesting. You know, I think you might find a climbing mastery, and the more you tier it up, the more new things you can climb on. Maybe ladders are very simple and you start off with those, but later you're getting the Echo Vald vines and whatever. Maybe the really slippery jade surfaces of extremely high waves in the Jade Sea can't be climbed on until way later when you get a mastery that gives you suction cups on your hands or whatever. Because don't forget, a lot of the masteries are actually describing physical equipment for you. I think this works. I've been playing Conan Exiles recently, and that has like this very simple climbing system where any kind of surface you go on, any at all, you just kind of hold a button and your character starts climbing. And it is very liberating. While I don't think they'll go that far because of all the ways in which then you're breaking Corteria. I mean, Corteria is kind of already broken with a sky scale, but there is still a significant proportion of the Guild Wars 2 player base that doesn't have the sky scale, so I think it's sort of a little bit okay. If this climbing mastery doesn't sound to me like it's going to be a really hard or a gold gated or a time gated thing, it's just going to be a part of the course of the expansion, and now you are going to have people climbing against invisible walls constantly back in Corteria, so I'm not too sure. You guys know me, I'm always cagey with the Corteria stuff anyway. Maybe they could just throw it there everywhere. But all of that said, I think one of the most important things about your idea is this does create a little bit more competitivity in terms of exploration for people who don't have springers and people who don't have the sky scale, i.e. people who didn't play Path of Fire can still explore the city in a reasonably fast and effective way. They can still go everywhere because they can climb. They do it in a different way, but they can climb. And I think that could be pretty nice if the devs are not going to disable mounts in any way. Hanaka says, I would love to see something with the Jade Brotherhood and the Amfa. Maybe a meta event, territorial control, like the Lux and Kurziks one in factions. Or maybe you can choose one of them in the story and then get aggro by the other in the world. Back in the day, you could play Kainang's City. Some quests allow you to get allies with one of them. Another possibility is that the Ministry of Purity has eradicated them, but I hope to see them again. Yeah, don't forget, it's not just these big two antagonistic guilds, but you've got a lot of other people around too, like the actual just Kainang Guards, or like the Obsidian Flame Guild. There's a lot of facets the devs can play with. This really brings me in mind of Amnoon in Path of Fire, which I wish we got to spend a little bit more time with, because if you remember, at the start of the Path of Fire story, you get to make a decision of what you want the people of Amnoon to do. Do they specifically ally with the Sun Spears, with the Awakened and Joko's forces, or do they try to stand free on their own? And you kind of get to play with the politics a little bit there. Depending on the choice you make, actually changes what the NPCs are that are roaming around in that town ever more. And I think just a little bit more content. This is a great example of one of those places where a different dialogue system or something that allowed them to just get more detail in would have been brilliant. And I think they could do something very similar to Kainang, where you have like this phased thing where different players have chosen different factions and they're seeing different characters walk around that are talking and so on. You can, of course, also bring it into the full-on meta events. You can do something like Drizzlewood, some of the new UI they did there with different people owning different territories, world versus world style. It's not just about the Kurziks and the Luxons. Even in Guild Wars 1, it wasn't really just about them. They weren't the only big factions, and the devs can play with these guys in a million ways. Again, the Elder Dragon story kind of takes precedence, I think, but they'll mix this stuff in for sure. And it's got to be right that the biggest, baddest bosses are the Ministry of Purity. Unless, of course, we are revealed that over the past 250 years, a lot of stuff has changed with them too. For those who don't know, the Ministry of Purity are basically the guys mostly responsible for Cantha's xenophobia and aggression towards the Tengu and all that stuff over the past 250 years. Retro Guy 200 says, probably unlikely to happen, but it'd be cool if the Oni attacked the Eye of the North through the Asura portal, having hacked it. I wonder what travel would be like in Cantha, as waypoints and portals are Asuran. Maybe Oni and other creatures have created a new way to fast travel? Well, I don't think that you're going to see any of this. I think that the Eye of the North is an Icebrood Saga thing, and it's acting as a hub for all of these stories that are going on in the game right now. I think they saw how much we liked the Sun's Refuge and realized that they could have used that the whole way through Season 4 if they'd introduced it earlier. So they're doing this kind of system for Icebrood Saga, and it's the Eye of the North. Once Icebrood Saga's over, I really think we are moving on from that area, and I doubt you'll see too many stories going on. Maybe some random collections will move us back there every now and then. And as to this other stuff, well, if you think about it, they did do Asura Gates during the Path of Fire era, but it was like the deactivated one on Istan that we'd seen in Guild Wars 1. Aside from that, the Asura didn't set one up in Amnoon. They didn't set one up at the Bone Palace. They didn't set one up at Vabi. And yeah, there were waypoints there, because remember, the devs kind of did this hand-wavy thing with Path of Fire, where they they said, oh, sorry, yeah, members of the Pact and like the Priory and stuff, they just came through just before you. Just a little bit before you. They came through and they put some waypoints down. So don't worry, they're already there. They kind of hand waved it real quick. I kind of like the idea that in this expansion, maybe, because the story beat was there, but maybe we explore it this time. Maybe a couple of the meta events are actually us alongside some members of the Asura. I don't know what kind of faction they'd be affiliated with, but we actually helping them put the waypoints down in the first place. You know how in game we've got the whole idea of contested waypoints the whole time? Well, maybe we actually get to see like that being used, though the story this time is that the waypoint doesn't exist until we actually place it there, and now it's no longer contested, so to speak. You know, you'd probably want to change the terminology a little bit. That'd be quite fun and really lean into how remote Cantha is meant to feel. Finally, Cairo says, I bet you thought that by episode 60 we would have some more info on End of Dragons, ... Yeah, I've seen this sentiment a few times. I think people are getting a bit sick of the wait now. With this daily series, I've got so many people thinking about the expansion constantly, and you're not going to get news on the expansion, so it's almost like giving yourself blue balls for no reasons. But to me, honestly, I didn't really expect that we'd have news. Maybe something. I think the Day of the Tengu is a really good opportunity for something small, but overall, no, not really. I pretty much knew that we could be in for a long course. It could be like 5 months before we get any news, guys. It could be that long. You know, 60 episodes, if you really think about it, back to back to back. We're only like 2 months, right? And I'm well aware of how many episodes, how many days it is. We could be into the hundreds before we get something, you know, really, really meaty. And even when we do, and by the way, we had a little bit of news in one of the earlier episodes, just a little bit, like some dev comment. And I'll continue to offer that as we get more. And even when we do get a bit of news, I mean, what am I going to do? Like a whole month straight of trailer analysis? No, we'll be back to this. It's a Q&A show, a little bit of state of the game, but largely about the expansion, and I just think that there's that much to say. The one thing you might see is that these episodes just start getting a little bit more bite-sized as we pace the comments out better. And, you know, this is not meant to be the be-all and end-all for the channel anyway. There are other projects I want to filter out with it, like Guild Wars 2 Mysteries and so on. Which, speaking of, I'm actually going to go back to a little bit of editing that I was working on before shooting this. So thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Keep your comments coming down below. Give me an idea for a big topic as well. And in the meantime, any odd thoughts you've got on End of Dragons, we'll keep it going. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.